Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today with the title, See the World, Deepen Relationships and Create Memories for You and Your Members. We've got Reinders, who's going to do the presentation for us. But before we give the floor to him, just a few local rules. Firstly, please just make sure that your microphone is on mute and your camera is on throughout the session. We would like to have see you there. And then also the questions we'll do at the end. So as and when we go through the presentation, please make some notes for those questions at the end. So that will be quite nice. So then you can just unmute yourself, please, and just ask your question. And yeah, so without any further ado, we've got Reinders. Thanks so much for your time. We appreciate it, and we look forward to having this presentation.
Morning, everyone. Sorry, I've just got someone who's rung my doorbell. I'm trying to see what's going on here. Thanks for the opportunity. I see a lot of faces there that I do recognize. I see Cassie from my home club at Royal Cape. I see the pro at Stellenbosch. We've been dealing with each other quite recently. But yeah, just a little bit of a background. I'm going to try and spend, I know this is a very busy time of the year for you guys. It's obviously season. The international tourists are arriving, which is a great thing for us as a business and for the country. I mean, the reality is South Africa is booming as a golf travel destination, and as a golf tour operator, we've seen that. Just a little bit, I'm going to share my screen with you now, and then I'm going to talk through travel, very much or mostly based on outbound travel. And it really is an opportunity for all of you as PGA pros to see the world. I mean, I've been indirectly and directly involved in the golf industry for about 25 years. I started my career in the whiskey industry, actually. I think many of you might have recalled my days as the Bell's marketing manager. I worked with a team of incredible people. You might recall people such as Alan Schumann, Derek Cuthbert, and Tommy Larkin in Durban. And that's really where I got to get involved in two of my passions, which are whiskey and golf. I think you may recall the older pros as the Bell's Experience days. We used to have them all over the country, and then we had a final event at Fancourt each year, and we took some people to Scotland, and that's where I got to meet both Dale Hayes and Dave Usendorf. Post then, I spent a couple of years as the sales and marketing director at Fancourt, so I got a sense of what it was like working at a golf resort, having to deal with members, which is something that you obviously all get to deal with on a daily basis and can be challenging at times, but at the same time, it creates incredible opportunities, and travel is in fact one of those. Yeah, and then I currently work, I'm the owner of a couple of tourism businesses. We own 3 tourism companies, of which all deal predominantly with inbound tourism. We also do a little bit of outbound tourism as well. So the 2 golf travel companies are Red Sands Golf Travel and Pro Golf Africa Safaris. We have a leisure and safari travel business called Gecko Africa Safaris, and we're also about to launch an exciting business in 2024 called Quagga Travel, which will be more linked to the domestic market. It will be similar to a bookings.com type of business. But ultimately, today I'd like to talk to you about tourism opportunities. And the reality is, I've been lucky enough to see so many places in the world as a result of being in the tourism industry. And I don't think the PGA pros necessarily understand what an amazing opportunity you have to travel and see the world. And to do that at very little cost. Because at the end of the day, if you can find the right core of people within your membership, you're going to get to see a lot of places, and it's going to cost you very little money. And that's ultimately the conversation that I'd like to share with you today. So what we're going to do is discuss this, but basically the essence of it is about seeing the world, deepening your relationships with your members, and creating memories for you and your membership. And as a PGA Pro, travel really does give you that opportunity. So the topics we're going to cover, and I'm going to try and keep this as short as possible so that we've got a little bit of time to answer some questions at the end, is we're going to talk about, do you plan and execute these trips yourself? Do you think you can do it? Have you got the capabilities? Do you understand what some of the pitfalls are? And I think that's often something that PGA pros don't necessarily understand. I think it's something that's quite easy to do, and it can be, but the question you've always got to ask is, what can go wrong? And what implication does that have for me? We're going to talk about the role of golf tour operators and travel agents, and what do they do? I think travel agents are sometimes seen almost in the same light as real estate agents. They're not, people don't necessarily see a lot of positive in travel agents. I can assure you, when the chips are down and there's a problem, you want a travel agent on your side, because that's the most difficult thing to sort out, is when flights go wrong. And since COVID, a lot of flights go wrong, and you need someone on your side there that can handle those kinds of issues. Very importantly, it's about managing the travel expectations of your members. I often see it where we have a PGA pro that approaches us and says, shit, I've got a member who says they're ready, they want to go to the Masters. And I don't think necessarily guys understand these days what it costs to do a trip to the Masters. And even members don't necessarily understand what it costs to do a trip to the Masters. So it is making sure that you understand your membership and clearly understand what their expectations are as well. You know, when a member also says to you, I'm going to Scotland, we're going to play the old course. So let's just try and manage those expectations in terms of what is the reality of playing the old course. And if you want to guarantee tee time, what is that going to cost you? I'm going to take you through some examples of international trips and what they cost. So we'll look at a typical Masters trip. We'll look at an Open Championship trip with some of the open router courses included in that itinerary. We're going to look at a hidden gems trip to Scotland, and then we'll also look at a destination that probably many of you don't necessarily know or have heard of as a great and affordable travel destination, and that's Bulgaria. And then I'm just going to chat to you about the process of putting a successful trip together. Right, so if you can bear with me, the first couple of slides is, well, I'm going to talk most. It's a little bit bullet point intensive, and I want to talk through a couple of things, and then we'll get more into the visual presentation, and we'll talk through some of the trips that will give you a sense of what is available in the market, or examples of that, and what do they cost. So the first sort of chapter to cover is, do you do it yourself, or do you work through a golf tour operator when putting a trip together? And a lot of that has to do with whether you're planning to travel locally or whether you're planning to travel internationally. And the most important thing out of all of this is one must understand the risks. If you're going to do this yourself, you must be aware of what the risks are. And I think there's some elements that people don't necessarily, or PGA pros don't necessarily know of or understand. And the first question you've got to ask is, what can go wrong and how can I be held liable? So often members will say to you, come, let's put a trip together. Everyone's happy and excited about the travel arrangements until something goes wrong. And then it's a question of, where are you potentially liable? So if you're an organizer of a trip, and let's specifically talk about both local and international, is, are you insured? And what does that mean? Have you got public liability insurance? Do you have professional indemnity insurance? And if there's a vehicle involved and you're the driver, or you've contracted someone to be the driver of that vehicle, do they have passenger liability insurance? And I'll talk a little bit about that later. Often what will happen is someone in the group, or even the golf pro, will say, don't worry guys, when we go on this trip to Joburg, I'll be the driver, or I can organize a driver for us. Or one of the members will say, oh, guys, don't worry. I know someone who's got one of those new 12-seater Quantums. I'll get that vehicle. We'll organize it. Someone's going to drive the vehicle. Well, that's where the problems can potentially start. Because the questions that arrive is when something goes wrong, does the driver or did the driver have a professional driving permit, a PDP license? Was that vehicle registered to carry passengers? Did the driver or does the driver have passenger liability insurance? And these things come into play when things go wrong. And the implication of that can be incredibly bad for a PGA Pro, because you could be the one held liable as the organizer of a trip like this. Drinking and driving is an obvious one. We don't even have to cover that up or cover that issue. But another thing that people don't necessarily take into account is what happens if the vehicle breaks down. So let's say you've hired a vehicle from Avis, you're driving to Sun City, you've just got on that highway outside of Pretoria, the car breaks down. Okay, you've probably got an answer there. You get hold of Imperial or Europe Car, they can potentially send another vehicle. But if you've booked a vehicle through a friend that you might have, or a supplier who's told you they can do a special deal for you, the question is, what happens? Do they have a vehicle backup if something goes wrong? Because that's where the problems on your trip are going to start. And it just sours the trip for everyone if there's a breakdown on a vehicle and the company that you're using or you've tried to organize this yourself does not have a backup vehicle. So one has to take these things into consideration. And then when it comes to flying, flying has become an absolute ball ache since COVID, especially on the international side. Flights get cancelled. They get cancelled 24 hours before a flight is scheduled to travel. Now, often if you're doing an international trip, you'll have guys or members saying, oh, you know, I've got Voyager miles on Emirates, or I'm going to fly via Doha and Qatar. You've got half of the group flying on British Airways. You've got some of the guys flying on KLM. And as soon as people book their own flights, it becomes a potential challenge. We'll talk about that a little bit later, provided you say to them, it's your responsibility to get to a specific destination on a specific date, and that's where the trip starts. The other option is to say, we're going to book these flights as a group, which is always the safest way to go, and we're going to use a travel agent to do that. Because when something goes wrong, once again, a flight gets cancelled 24 hours before the time, and suddenly you become the person responsible to try and sort out these flights. It's an absolute nightmare. You rather want to pick up the phone a travel agent, and make it their problem. They're the professionals at doing this, and they will sort it out. I just want to give you a scenario with regards to what can go wrong. So let's say, for example, we've got Jason Bird at Ehrenvale, Jason Bird at the Zalza, and he's doing a members trip. 12 guys are going to Johannesburg. They're going to play Blair Athol, Royal Johannesburg, Kensington, and Serengeti. 4-night trip, and Jason's managed to organize a Quantum, a 12-seater Quantum, 12 guys going on the trip, and he's going to be the driver. Obviously, the other thing to take into consideration is you've got 12 golf bags with you. So you're going to need a trailer. So you've got a Quantum, and you're driving a box trailer, which you've got to try and source from somewhere, because you're not going to get 12 golf bags into a Fender trailer. But now you leave Johannesburg International Airport, and you get onto the highway, and en route, an accident happens. You weren't the cause of the accident, but someone gets seriously injured. Someone in your group gets seriously injured. The first thing the police are going to want to understand is this vehicle, does it have a permit to carry 12 people in it? So, did you have a PDP license? And that's the first thing that's going to go wrong. The second thing they're going to ask is, have you got passenger liability insurance? Now, obviously, these are things that PGA pros don't have. And that's where the lawyers get involved, and that's where a PGA pro can be held liable in a situation like this, either as the driver of the vehicle or as the organizer of the trip. Now, and these are things that people don't necessarily take into consideration. So things can go horribly wrong if you try shortcuts with regards to something like this. Right, so let's move on to this group of people that are involved in the industry, and that's tour operators or travel agents. So tour operators can either be leisure operators, or there's a number of golf tour operators that you can find in South Africa, as well as golf tour operators that you can find all over the world. And I'm going to use the word reputable tour operators or travel agents. And one must understand something. In this country, any one of you can start a tour operator business tomorrow. There's absolutely no legislation in this country that stops you from becoming a tour operator. You don't need a license. You don't necessarily need to have any insurance. You can run it from your office at your golf club. You can become a golf tour operator. But there's challenges there. Because if you don't have the necessary insurances, that's where the trouble starts. So all I'm trying to say is, if you're going to deal with a tour operator or a travel agent, make sure that they're reputable and that they have the necessary insurances in place, or they belong to an organization or association such as SATSA, which is the South African Tourism Services Association, which is very particular to this country, or they belong to something like IACTO, which is the International Association of Golf Tour Operators, so which does regulate the industry to some extent. But as I said, in South Africa, the challenge is there is no regulation in terms of running a business like this. So you need to find reputable people if you're going to expose yourself and your membership and their money, and put their money in the hands of somebody else. Make sure that they're reputable. Dealing with a tour operator or a travel agent ultimately for you is a one-stop shop. You have one contact person that you deal with that does absolutely everything. They do restaurant bookings, they organize transfers, they organize tea times, accommodation, excursions, anything that you need, because you don't necessarily have the time and expertise to do that yourself. This is what these people do. They're professionals at what they do. And again, if you find a reputable partner to work with, they're going to save you a lot of time and money in the long term. In turn, reputable tour operators will also use credible suppliers. And that becomes a very, very important thing, especially when it comes to transport. Transport is one of the most critical things when it comes to a golf trip. So you've got to have the right size vehicle, you've got to have the right size trailer, and those transport suppliers need to have the right insurance in place. No reputable tour operator will use a transport company that is not credible and has the necessary insurances in place. Another important thing is that reputable tour operators that do quite a lot of business, they have negotiated rates with accommodation suppliers, golf courses, and transport providers. Now, a tour operator doesn't make money out of green fees. I mean, you guys will know it for yourselves. I think an STO rate mostly at a golf course in South Africa is probably 10%. So if a round is 850 Rand, the tour operator is making 85 Rand on a round. That's not real money. Tour operators make their money on accommodation. And the reason for that is a lot of the accommodation suppliers are dependent on tour operators to fill their hotels. So they understand that tour operators need to make money on accommodation. So in some instances, for example, a tour operator that does volume could get anything between 30 and 35% off the rack rate. Now, the rack rate is the published rate that you will see online. So people have this sense, especially in South Africa, that why must I book through a tour operator when I can do it myself from an accommodation perspective, because they're not necessarily going to be cheaper. You'll be very surprised in most instances that a golf tour operator will be able to get you a better accommodation rate than you would be able to get directly. I mean, obviously that you'll have outliers, like for example, if you go to St. Francis Links and you chat to Jeff Claus, he'll be able to get you a deal within some of the homeowners' homes. That's a different situation. But if you're doing a members trip to Fancourt, for example, I would suggest you first check what accommodation rates you can get with a tour operator, which might actually be cheaper than what you can get as a PGA Pro bringing your members across. Right, the other thing, and this becomes important more for international travel, is a lot of the big tour operators in Scotland, for example, have got access to guaranteed tee times at the old course. They bid for those tee times at the beginning of the year and they get allocated to them. So if you're working with an operator, either someone who's just a ground handler in Scotland, or you're working through a tour operator in South Africa doing outbound, they in turn will find suppliers that can provide the best deals for you in South Africa traveling outbound. The same thing with the Masters, and one has to be so careful with the Masters. There are some interesting characters out there. You can't buy, I mean, many of you will know this, but you can't buy a ticket to the Masters. It's a badge. That badge has got somebody else's name on it. It's done through a broker. The broker sells a package which includes accommodation and entry to the Masters. And you've got to make sure that those guys have been in the game for a long time and that they are reputable people, because I've heard many stories from well-known people in the golf industry here in South Africa that have booked a trip, arrived in Atlanta, expected to see their operator with their Masters entry badges, and they're nowhere to be seen. And you've spent, and your members have spent a fortune to go there. So one has to be very careful in terms of who you end up working with, especially for high value packages such as the Masters. Another thing that often is not taken into consideration is the management of money, especially for outbound travel. And the reality is, here in South Africa, our exchange rate is incredibly volatile. You guys know that. I mean, I had a look yesterday, the pound was sitting at 23 Rand to the pound. So now you're doing a trip to Scotland. It's in a year's time. Your members need to fork out a deposit. Let's say it's a 30% deposit now to travel in September 2024. And your members are saying, yes, but you know, the exchange rate is really tough at the moment. And can we pay it all now? Or now's not a good time. It's 23 pounds to the Rand. Can we sit and wait a little bit? Well, there's actually ways around that a tour operator can assist you with, is they can take out a foreign exchange contract. So as soon as the deposit is paid today, which is, for example, a 30% deposit, we would go to the bank. We'd go and get a foreign exchange contract with the bank that guarantees what the exchange rate is going to be when you pay the balance payment 120 days from the travel date. So that at least your members know that if they're in for a specific pound amount, that they know what the fixed exchange rate is going to be. And for a lot of people, and especially for clubs where there are members that have been and understand business, that's one of the things they might ask is, how do we manage the exchange rate so that I'm not affected by the exchange rate variances that might take place over the next 12 months. Another important thing is that the bigger tour operators have got negotiated terms and conditions with their suppliers, so that if something goes wrong, someone gets sick and cannot travel, they break a leg, it's not going to be a situation where your operator is going to turn around and say, sorry, mate, you saw what the terms and conditions were. If you can't travel, it's full cancellation. The bigger guys will do their best to make sure that whatever cancellation you might have as a result of an injury or what it might be, they'll try and manage that effectively for you. And they've got the relationship with the suppliers in order to have that conversation. But if you've made a booking with somebody for the first time, they don't really know who you are, they might not go out of their way to try and manage something like someone who gets injured and can't travel as a result of an injury. And then again, I think this is a very important thing, is when it comes to flights, travel agents solve problems, because it's when the problems arise when you could potentially be sitting with clients coming from all over the world. Someone's coming in 2 days later. That has an impact on their trip. They're going to miss the first 2 days of golf, and that happened to be a guaranteed tee time at the old course. You want a travel agent involved that gets them there on time, reroutes them on a different flight. It's just the safer way to go. It might cost a little bit more money, but it's the safer way to go, is to book flights through a travel agent. Ultimately, a reputable tour operator will save you time and money. And at the end of the day, it's going to provide you and your members with the best experience, because members are going to be angry with you when things go wrong. And you want to be in a situation where if there's an issue, there's one person you can talk to, they're experts in the field, and they will sort the problems out. And then again, just booking flights through travel agents, it's going to cost you more, but they're going to save you a world of pain when things go wrong. Right. The next segment is understanding your members and managing their travel expectations. And we're going to talk a little bit about, and I'll give you some examples here. So let's talk about the average age. If your membership base that wants to travel are older, you have to take that into consideration. It sounds like an obvious thing, but doing a 8-night itinerary with 7 rounds of golf is just not going to work. To get a guy or a couple who are 75 years old and getting them to play 6 rounds of golf in 7 days is not going to work. So you have to be wary of the group that you're taking on the trip and what are their physical capabilities. And that also relates to what is their handicap and what golf courses are they going to play. I'll bring that up a little bit later. Can they afford it? And I'm going to bring up the Masters example again. Is we often get this request. Come, we want to go to the Masters. I can get 6 guys who want to go to the Masters. And the operator goes off, does a whole lot of work, negotiates a deal, comes back with a package, and it's 350,000 Rand per person, excluding flights. And suddenly it's, shit, we didn't realize it was going to be that much. A Masters badge these days is between $1,500 and $1,750 per day. So you're in for almost 30,000 Rand per day just to go and watch the Masters as a general entry. And people don't necessarily understand that. Can you get the numbers? Now, a lot of packages that are put together on an international front are based on seven paying packs traveling with the pro as the host. And the PGA Pro having to show accreditation that they are a PGA Pro. So when you put a package together like this and the numbers are 7 plus 1, your members need to understand we need to get 7 paying packs to go on this trip. They don't necessarily need to know that you're traveling free. Some of them might be okay with that. Some of them might not necessarily be okay with the fact that, shit, I'm paying for Michael to go on this trip. And the reality, they're not really paying. Most of the hotels and golf courses do, in fact, provide a free of charge for the PGA Pro. But getting the right number is crucial, because if the numbers reduce before the trip takes place, there could be a supplementary cost that will go through to the rest of the people, whether they're 5 or 6 or 3 or 4. Right, then we've got the time of the year. And obviously one needs to take into account a couple of things. Is when is the right time to go to that specific destination? The heart of summer is not always the greatest time. I'll use Florida as an example. You don't want to be in Florida in July, August. It is the worst time to be in Florida. Humidity is crazy, and you're looking at 35 to 40 degrees per day. The right time of the year to go to Scotland, you never know. It's never really the right time of the year to go to Scotland. You could be there in June, July and have terrible weather, or you could be there in September, October and happen to find a window when the weather is perfect. But it's also taking into account when is the best time for you to travel. I mean, I would imagine now is not a great time for you guys to travel because you're going into season. but these are things that one has to take into consideration, is the time of year for the destination, and as well as the best time of the year for you to travel with your members. Right, then we get what we call in our business the wanders. And this is the reality. Every club has got one or two people that you actually just don't want to travel with. They make it unpleasant for you. They make it unpleasant for the rest of the people to travel. And it's a reality that one has to try and avoid traveling with these people. I mean, we've had instances where, and I use Wander as an example. It was a member from a specific golf club, very well-known golf club in the US, in Florida. Some of the members didn't know that Wanda was on the trip until they arrived in South Africa, and they saw her at the reception in the hotel. No one wanted to play golf with Wanda. No one wanted to sit with Wanda at the dinner table. Everyone avoided Wanda at breakfast time, and it actually became unpleasant for everybody else. So one has to be very careful about who you decide to take on a trip like this. It has an impact on your enjoyment of the trip, as well as the other members that are traveling with you. So just the key thing is avoid the wanders. How capable and fit are they as golfers? I think that goes a little bit with the average age as well. So take into account how many rounds of golf you're going to play in how many days. Then we've got boys' trips or couples trips. I recently had a situation where we proposed a trip to Bulgaria for a group. The initial idea was that the group would stay in Varna. Now, Varna is quite a lively, it's the second biggest city in Bulgaria. It's quite lively. There's a lot of good nightlife, lots of restaurants. It's a nice place to be for younger people, or for a boys' trip. It's a great destination to be. But you've got to travel about 45 minutes to an hour to the golf courses on a daily basis. They're all about 45 minutes or an hour away from Varna. And the membership came back and said, "Shit, this looks like a great trip, but you know what? We're going to travel with our wives, and we're all a bit older, and we're not interested in the nightlife. We'd rather be somewhere closer, where the travel to the golf courses is a lot less. And there's a place called Balchik. So we've now changed the trip for people to stay in Balchik, which is more of a sort of sleepy destination. It's a little bit like Hermanus, not a lot of nightlife, but perfect for older people, for couples, and it's 15 to 20 minutes away from the golf course. So one has to take this into consideration. Is it a boys' trip or is it a couples' trip? And what are the age of the people that are going on the trip? And then the last thing is just, does the trip fulfill their expectations? So if somebody says, I want to go to Scotland, and I want to play the old course, and I don't want to do this if I can't play the old course, but you don't have a guaranteed time, you're going to have the guys in the ballot system for 3 days in the hope that they might play the old course. One has to manage those expectations, because if they're going to Scotland, because of the fact that they're going to play the old course and it's not guaranteed, one has to manage those expectations. And it is becoming more difficult. I think it's almost impossible right now to get an old course tee time for 2024, unless you're in the ballot. And then again, you might not end up playing with the rest of your 4-ball. It might be a 1-ball or a 2-ball on one of the days that you might be in St. Andrews, if you're lucky. So one must manage those expectations. Right, so it's going to be a little bit more visual now. So I'm going to take you guys through a couple of packages and just give you a sense of what these things cost. Then we'll just have a discussion at the end around what do you typically need to do to put a trip together, and then I'll answer a couple of questions if there are any. So let's first look at the Masters. So I've taken a typical Masters package for 2024 through a reputable operator that we worked with for the last 10 years. And as you guys know, it's a bucket list trip for a lot of people. It's an iconic trip, but the reality is it's an expensive trip. So this is a typical 6-night package to the Masters, staying in Augusta. Now, there are cheaper ways to do this. You can go and stay in Colombia, which is about an hour outside of Augusta. But it does work out cheaper. There's hotels in Colombia, but you could end up spending a lot of time on the road and in the traffic trying to get in and out of Augusta. So this is the sort of the premium package that you're going to have, staying in Augusta at the Best Western Plus, 6 nights accommodation, including breakfast. And then in that hotel, there's an evening reception every evening where there's sort of cocktails and canapes that are available and free of charge. In terms of Masters accreditation, you have got access to the Wednesday practice round. You've got access to the Wednesday Par 3 tournament. And then you've got a Friday Masters and a Sunday Masters entry badge. Again, it's quite a process. You've got to go to this operator's office in the morning. You've got to give them a rather large deposit on your credit card. I think it's in the region of about 35 to 50,000 Rand. They hold that deposit until you return with the badge later that evening. That badge has got somebody else's name on it. If you lose that badge or you misbehave, and that person loses their badge, that's why they take the big deposit. It includes 2 rounds of golf, and that's 18 holes at Palmetto Golf Club and 18 holes at the Reserve Golf Club. They're both sort of in South Carolina, so it's on the border of Augusta, Georgia. And when you're at the Reserve Club, there's a VIP package where all your food and your drinks are included. It excludes your flights to and from the USA. It excludes airport transfers or car hire. It excludes travel insurance and then any other lunch or dinners or drinks. So day 1, you arrive in Augusta, you check in. Day 2, you're going to go to the Par 3 tournament and you'll have access to the practice round. Day 2. Day 3, you play golf. Day 4 is the Friday where you get access to the Masters tournament. Day 5, you play golf again, and then day 6, you've got the final day at the Masters, and you depart then on day 7. It's a very basic hotel. It's newly renovated, and then there's a little bit of history on the 2 golf courses, Palmetto and the Reserve Golf Club. That package per person sharing $15,765. Now, I've based these package prices on the fact of a 7+1. So the pro is traveling for free. We've included in that a international flight for the pro, flying economy class. And there's a small amount of cash. I think it's about $600 for the pro to spend. But guys, this is the reality. That's what a 6-night package to the Masters is going to cost, based on a 7+1. Just to put that into context, 15,765 Rand is 295,000. Is $15,765 is 295,000 Rand, excluding international flights. So this is an expensive package. There are ways to cheapen it. You can, for instance, just go into Augusta for 2 days, go and watch the golf on a Thursday and Friday, and then go to other parts of the US. So South Carolina is a great place to go and play golf, and you can probably do that package for half the price. But often guys say, no, I want to go to the Masters, I want to stay in Augusta, but this is the reality of what a trip like that costs. I think the other thing that scares the people away is, specifically with a Masters package, you have to pay a 50% non-refundable deposit. That's not what we ask for. That's what our ground handler and provider and broker in the States requires to guarantee that package. So you're already 150 grand down at the time of committing to this, and it is non-refundable. I don't know how they get away with this in the US, but it's the reality and it's the way that it is. Right, then we're going to look at the Open Championship and a Best of Scotland trip. So this is a trip we actually did for Dave Usendorf. Him and his son Michael hosted a group of 6 players to the Open in at the Old Course in 2022. They actually had an amazing trip. They spent 5 nights in St Andrews. I was actually on that trip with them. And then they had 4 nights at the Marine Hotel and Spa, which is on the western side of Scotland, on the west coast. They played 6 rounds of golf. So they played at Scotscraig Links, just outside of St Andrews. They played the St Andrews Dukes course. They played Kings Barnes, Turnberry, Ailsa, Prestwick, and Royal Troon. So you've got 4 real iconic golf courses on that itinerary. They were at the Open for 2 days. They were there on the Friday and the Sunday. They did a whiskey distillery tour, and there was a fancy dinner that was included in all of this. All their transfers were included. That's both airport transfers and golf transfers. I'm not going to go through the detail of the itinerary, but all the inclusions are there. Basically, in St Andrews, one of the options there is to do accommodation at the St Andrews University. And in fact, the university closes for quite a large period of the year, generally in June, July, August. And you can actually use the university's accommodation, which is very well located in St Andrews and is a slightly cheaper option than staying in the hotels or guest houses in St Andrews itself. And then the second part of the trip was the Marine Hotel and Spa. I'm not going to go too much through the golf courses. I'm sure many of you will be aware of these courses. Turnberry Ailsa now must be one of the most incredible golfing experiences in the world. Royal Troon, I think that's where next year's Open is. And then Prestwick, which is just, the history of this golf course is absolutely incredible. I think the first Open was won here by Tom Morris many, many years ago. Okay, that trip cost $6,170 pounds per person. Obviously, we're looking here at 2022. And to put that into context, that's about 155,000 Rand, excluding international flights. Right, there are other options. So often, if people have been to Scotland before, or they understand that playing at the likes of Kings Barnes, Troon, Prestwick, Murfield, Carnoustie are expensive. It's anywhere between 250 and 350 pounds per round, excluding a caddy. It does add up when you're playing at those open router courses. There are options to play some of the other hidden gems. And I don't know, for those of you that have been to Scotland, there is still incredible links opportunities to play on great links courses without necessarily having to play the open router courses. So this is an example of a trip to Scotland, and we've costed it on May to September 2024. It's based on 9 nights. So 3 nights at the Dundonald Golf Resort in Ayrshire, 3 nights at the Argowan Hotel in St Andrews, and then 3 nights at the Watchman Hotel in Gullen. 6 rounds of golf, playing Dundonald, Western Gales, Dunbar Links, North Berwick, which is absolutely incredible. St Andrews Jubilee course, Dumbarnie Links, which is a new course, but I chatted to Dale Hayes about it last year, and he said it is absolutely incredible. And then what would happen during your 3-night stay in St Andrews is that we would put you into the ballot with the chance of getting onto the old course. There's whiskey distillery visits included, and then there's obviously transport from the airport and between the necessary golf courses and distilleries. Again, I'm not going to go through much through the day-to-day itinerary. I'll make this presentation available to everyone. Just an idea on the hotels on offer. Dundonald used to be the sister hotel to Loch Lomond, or the sister golf course to Loch Lomond. So they built this fantastic golf resort style accommodation on the golf course itself. The Watchman Hotel is in Gullen. There's obviously also the opportunity to play Gullen. They played the Scottish Open there recently. They've got Gullen 1, 2, and 3. And then the Argowan Hotel is actually in the heart of St Andrews. just a little bit on each of the courses. Dunbarney Links actually opened in May 2020, so it's the newest golf course in Scotland. But I haven't seen it myself, but Dale said to me it was truly spectacular. I've played Western Gales. It is absolutely special experience. It's got to be one of the finest golf courses in Scotland. And if you compare it to the likes of, as much as these courses have got a lot of history, like Carnoustie and even the old course, Western Gales is in reality a much better links course. Dundonald, the Jubilee course at St Andrews, where you get the feel of being there, and it is actually the toughest course of the three that are there. And then North Berwick, I think most people will know, is truly spectacular, and it's where they played the Scottish Open earlier this year. Right, that trip is a little bit, as you can see, less expensive with a bit more golf. And there, on average, you're looking at about 85,000 Rand per person, excluding international airfare. Right, and then we go on to, that trip includes, again, the pro traveling for free. We've included an allocation for flights as well as an allocation for a cash amount, so that you've got some cash in hand while you're on the trip. Right, and then I want to bring to the fore a destination that this has got to be something that South Africans need to look at as an option that is affordable. When you get to Bulgaria, you pay for a beer, what you pay in South Africa, you pay for a steak, what you pay in South Africa. And the reality is there are three absolutely spectacular golf courses. And that's the hidden gem of Bulgaria. Right, so a few years ago, it's a little bit like the story of Turkey actually in golf, is that Bulgaria decided to create a destination where three golf courses basically came out of nothing. Two of those designed by Gary Player, and then the other one designed by Ian Wisdom. And this package specifically is a 6-night package, staying at a hotel in Varna. I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but Varna is quite a lively, it's the second biggest city in Bulgaria. It's quite a lively city with a lot of restaurants, nightlife. Their seasons are obviously the opposite to ours. So when it's our winter, it's their summer. So August, September is actually the best time to travel, and which for us generally is a quieter period, or as a PGA pro, it could necessarily be a quieter period of the year for you. It includes 4 rounds of golf, 2 of those at Thracian Cliffs, which is, I mean, if we had to do a comparison of Thracian Cliffs to what is here in South Africa, it would be Pinnacle Point. It is a truly spectacular golf course. A round of golf at Black Sea Rama, and a round of golf at Lighthouse. So it's a short trip. It's a 6-night trip, 4 rounds of golf, and you're staying in the city of Varna, which is about a 45-hour transfer to each of the golf clubs. So again, one has to look here around flights. We would recommend that this is done through a travel agent, and that we've looked at all the various routes, and flying on Turkish Airlines via Istanbul is the most viable option. And again, with any trip like this, the recommendation would be that we book these flights as a group trip, that everyone is on the same flight. And the complication here is that there's limited flights to Varna. They don't fly every single day. They fly every second day. So you've got to get the dates right. And this is where it's key to do a trip like this and have the flights done through a travel agent. You don't try and do this trip yourself in terms of flights. So you have day 1 arrival, day 2 playing Lighthouse, day 3 Thracian Cliffs, which again is this most spectacular of the 4. Day 4 you've got a day at leisure. Day 5 you play Black Sea Rama. Day 6 you play Thracian Cliffs again, and then day 7 is your day of departure. Just to give you guys a sense of the city of Varna, it's a beautiful city, a lot of history, and as I said, it's quite a lively place. But again, if your group is slightly younger, this is where you base them. If your group is a little bit older and they just want a rustiger place to be, something like Hermanus, then we'll rather put them in the town of Balchik, which is about 15 to 20 minutes from the golf course. That's an example of the hotel in Varna and then the golf courses. So Thracian Cliffs is truly spectacular. It's on the cliff face on the Black Sea. You've got Black Sea Rama, which is another Gary Player design. It's a links course. And then Lighthouse, which is also on the ocean, and this is an Ian Wisdom design. But there's 3 spectacular golf courses, and you'll play 4 rounds. And we would always recommend that 2 of those rounds are at Thracian Cliffs, because that is obviously the most spectacular of the 3 golf courses. What does that trip cost? 1,500 euros. So that's about 31,000 Rand per person. Again, it's based on a 7+1, so the pro travels for free, and it includes an economy class flight for the pro to travel as well. So this, I really just wanted to give you guys an array of options, from Masters, which is obviously a very, very expensive trip. It's an iconic trip, but it is expensive. There are ways to cut the cost on the Masters. Looking at an Open Championship trip, similar to the one that Dave and Michael did. Then looking at a Scotland Hidden Gems trip. And then lastly, something which will be most affordable to most members is looking at a trip to the likes of a destination such as Bulgaria.
I didn't catch that. Could you try again?
Right, so that's the little bit on destinations that one can consider. Right, then the last bit is just, if you're going to put a trip together as a PGA pro, what is the process you need to go through? What are the things you need to consider? So the first thing is, and this is a very basic question, some pros like to travel and some don't. So if travel is something you want to do, and the reality again is you're sitting with such an incredible opportunity to see the world, it's your voice. You're the one that's going to do something about it. So be proactive about it. Get a core group of members together that like to travel and start running a travel program. So if you want to travel, you can make it happen. Obviously, you need to understand where you want to go to. And it's going to come from 2 places. Either members are going to come to you and say, let's go and do a trip overseas, or they're going to say, let's go and do a trip to Scotland or wherever it might be. But the other option is to be proactive and actually put a proposal forward to them. So if you understand your membership base, you understand in reality how much money they can spend on a trip. Are they the 350,000 Masters trip people, or are they a 35,000 Rand Bulgaria or Mauritius type membership base? Most importantly, if the members come to you with wanting to do a trip, they need to give you a detailed brief. Because at the end of the day, they're going to hold you accountable for what you put forward to them. So if they say to you, I want to play the old course, I want a guaranteed time on the old course, and that's the brief, that's the only reason I want to go to Scotland, then that's what you need to brief the operator. But you need to tell the member that if you want that, it's going to cost you money. So the detailed brief from the membership is absolutely critical. Again, if you're going to talk to the members about a trip, talk to the right audience. Don't pitch a Masters trip to people who you know can't afford it. It's going to disappoint everyone at the end of the day. You're going to spend a lot of time talking to an operator, trying to get the answers, trying to get a quote, and at the end of the day, the quote's not even going to be relevant to the people that you're talking to. And then very importantly, if you're going to work with a tour operator, and I would recommend that you do that, make sure it's a reputable partner. Ask the questions. You can ask them, what insurances do you have in place? Do you outsource your transport? If you outsource your transport, does that transport provider have the necessary licenses, public liability, passenger liability? That's absolutely critical, and it's your right to ask those questions and for them to show that to you. From a flight perspective, if you're doing an international trip, try as far as possible to get everyone on the same flight. If they're not on the same flight, you make it very clear to them that the start of the trip is on a specific date at a specific place, and it's their responsibility to get there. You don't want a situation where you have a package and the package includes a transfer from Edinburgh, but the guy's arriving into Glasgow. Now he arrives into Glasgow, there's no transfer waiting for him there because the deal that you did with the operator was a transfer from Edinburgh. The guy now had to spend £350 getting from Glasgow to St Andrews, and the trip starts off on a sour note. So be very clear with your members. If they're not on the same flight and they're not departing from the same place, where they need to be, what the destination is, and what date, and you make them accountable to be there on the required date and time. Very, very importantly, be clear with your members on what's included in the trip and what is excluded in the trip. So things like caddies often come up. I really would like a caddy at St Andrews. Can you organize one for me? But the guys don't understand that a caddy at St Andrews is going to cost them about £120. So be very clear from the start what's included, what's not included. Also, they need to understand what the minimum numbers are. So if you've committed to a trip of 7 paying people and your members have said, absolutely, we'll find a group of 7 members, there needs to be 7 members, because if there's less than 7, everyone's going to have to pay more. So the costs of things like transportation are divided by 7, taking into account that the pro is traveling for free. So they need to understand the minimum numbers, what the implication is. They need to clearly understand the payment terms, and they need to clearly understand the cancellation terms. I think what's important for you guys, and again, it's the opportunity. If you can travel, you need to obviously keep your costs to a minimum. So when you talk to the operator, make sure what is included for you and what is not included. What is ideal is that your package costs are included. It includes an allocation for you to fly, but it also potentially includes an allocation for you to have some cash on the other side. Because when you buy a couple of rounds of beers in Scotland, you'll very soon come to realize that you're not going to be the first one to put your hand up when the guys want a round of beer or a round of whiskey or whatever it is. So you want to be in a situation where, as far as possible, you are traveling comfortably and you're not out of pocket. This is incredibly important. Your members must sign a contract with a tour operator. You don't sign a contract with a tour operator on behalf of your members, because you become accountable for cancellation and payment. So make sure that whoever you're dealing with, that the tour operator puts a contract together which is signed by each member. Then they become liable for payments and cancellation. Let the tour operator handle the money. Okay, this is also an important thing. You don't want to handle your members' cash. Tour operators handle it. They take out the foreign exchange contracts. They can talk to the members where they have concerns around what money needs to be paid when. Am I going to pay money out of my international bank account into your FEC account? Let the tour operator manage the cash. It's the last thing that you want to sit with, is trying to manage people who want to pay. Some of them want to pay in dollars, some of them want to pay in euros, some of them have got a bank account in London and they want to pay in pounds. You don't want to have to deal with that. Let the operator deal with it. And then, importantly, if you want to have a great trip, avoid the wonders. Don't travel with members that are going to make it unpleasant for yourself and your other members. Traveling must be fun, and it can be a huge amount of fun if you're traveling with the right group of people. Right, that was more on the international side. I think on the local side, I just want to add in a couple of things. If you're doing a local trip and you're doing a trip and it is, for example, It's the members at Steenberg that are going to go and play against the members at St. Francis Links. There's one thing you've got to be careful of, and it's just really one thing, is ask yourself the question, what can go wrong and where will I be held liable? And the only place where that's really an issue is going to be around transport. So make sure you're using a transport provider. Unless the guys are hiring their own cars and driving to St. Francis, it's fine. But if you're going to take on the responsibility of getting everybody there in one vehicle, make sure you're taking your members in a vehicle that has a permit to drive, that the driver's got a license to carry people, and that they've got the necessary insurances in place. If it comes to accommodation, and you're not necessarily getting a special deal from the pro who's organizing the trip or a specific accommodation supplier or guest house, you can always check on a tour operator to see if they can get you a better accommodation rate. They're not going to charge you to search. This is what they do. So they'll have on-hand rates and will be able to give you rates. And then again, if you're going to do flights, the best thing is get everybody on the same flight. Or you say to them, it's your responsibility to be at a specific day and a specific time, and only once they get there are you accountable for what happens until they go home. Right, that's what I wanted to cover with you guys today. So does anyone have any questions at this stage?
Cole, I saw there was one question in the chat room. Essentially, it gets down to the PDP license. What is the minimum amount of passengers that you can sort of transport without a PDP license? And how do you sort of go about dealing with those types of stuff? If we can just get some advice on that.
So a PDP license is required if there are 12 people in the vehicle. So it's 12 or more. Getting a PDP license today is incredibly difficult. I mean, the transport operators are pulling their hair out with government at the moment. So it's not just something you go and get. It's something you have to apply for. It's a process. And again, unless this is something that you're going to be doing 5, 6, 7 times a year, I don't even think it's worth it. But the minimum number is 12 people, including the driver.
Awesome, cool. Thanks so much. And then just some advice on travel insurance.
All right. So travel insurance is incredibly important, especially when it comes to international travel. And there's something called cancellation and curtailment. Now, often somebody will say, I get travel insurance for my credit card anyway. Now, people need to be very clear, or members need to be very clear what is included in the travel insurance they get with their credit card. Because in most instances, that travel insurance is quite limiting. So cancellation and curtailment, for example, is, let's say you go on the trip, but your flight is delayed or cancelled, and you have to be put onto another flight. So you arrive in Scotland 2 days later than when your trip actually started. Curtailment insurance is so that you can claim the portion back that you actually lost out on. So it's just very important for both yourself as well as your members that if you're traveling internationally, that you make sure you have the right insurances in place. But travel insurance is critical.
Thanks, Colin. Just the last question from my side. What is your advice on passports and visas?
Yeah, this is something that people often forget about, is how long it takes these days to get a visa. Now, if you're traveling to Europe, obviously, there's a lot of South Africans that have British passports, and that's easy because you can get in and out of a European destination quite easily with a British passport. But if you're traveling on a South African passport, one needs to take into account that, let's say, for example, you have decided to fly on British Airways to get to a destination in Spain. You're going to need a transit visa. So you're going to have to go to the British consulate. You're going to need to get a visa from the British consulate, which is a transit visa. That can take up to 14 days. Then you've still got to get another visa to go to the destination that you're going to. So let's say, for example, the destination is in Spain. You have to apply for a Schengen visa to get to Spain. That's going to take you another 14 to 21 days. So you have to take all of that into consideration in terms of how long it takes, as well as the cost, because the cost of getting a visa these days can actually be quite expensive. But one has to be very careful. And sometimes members don't necessarily take this into consideration, is they wake up quite late realizing, oh shit, my passport is about to expire. I don't have enough pages in my passport, because some countries require you to have, for example, 3 empty pages in your passport, 3 empty consecutive pages in your passport, and your passport has to expire or the latest expiry date can only be 6 months from expiry. So these are all things that one has to be very clear on when traveling internationally.
Awesome, cool. Thanks so much. Any other questions, guys and ladies? Please just unmute yourself and ask your question. I think you covered most of this stuff, Nicole. Thanks so much. Also, just a few. There's a lot of thank yous that came through on the chat room, like Dave Usendorf, Paul McKenzie, Louis Destru, all giving them thanks together with a lot of other pros. Also from the PGA side, thanks so much for your time and info for the session. We truly appreciate it. And I think that sort of covers everything.
All right, thanks for the opportunity, gentlemen and ladies. And yeah, if you do want to have a chat about international travel, I know domestically you guys probably can get the most of that stuff sorted out yourselves and amongst yourselves. Just again, please be careful on the transport side. But if you are looking at some opportunities to take your members overseas, you can definitely make contact with us at Red Sands Golf Travel or through Pro Golf Africa Safaris.
Awesome, cool. Thanks so much. Thanks for your time. Also, thanks to all the PGA pros that came to watch and spent your time with us. We truly appreciate it. And then, yeah, I'll see you at the next webinar. Cole, enjoy your day. Thanks so much. And then all of the best to everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Keep well.
Cheers, everyone.
Have a good season.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Cole. You guys too. Bye.